snap, boom, kill. Those are the basics of the Sorceress Cold Explosion build in Path of Exile 2. We're taking the biggest and best skills that support an everlasting winter, putting them all together and turning you into the ultimate winter queen. Cold bombs that freeze and shatter enemies, walls of ice that freeze and shatter enemies, space rocks falling from the sky that freeze and shatter enemies. You get the point. Here's what you need to get this standard league starter going. To start, our weapon base of choice is the Gelid Staff that provides the freezing shard skill on top of being able to roll some critical affixes meant for cold support. We won't be using freezing shards too much later in the build as you progress towards later acts and maps, but it does provide decent freeze buildup and can help explosions of Frostwall go off. The Gelid Staff can roll affixes that add levels to spell skill gems, increase spell and cold damage, increase freeze buildup, mana regeneration, and more. So keep an eye out for a combination of these affixes to fine-tune the build. Alright, let's move on to the slotted skills, starting with Frostwall. Since you'll want to spam it as much as possible, we're slotting the Ingenuity support skill for its cooldown recovery rate. The Deep Freeze skill gem gives Frostwall even more freeze buildup, and then Spell Echo will cast the wall twice each time you activate it. It won't look like much here, but rest assured that there are two walls stacked on top of each other when you do this. This does come at a cost of cast speed, but we are cancelling that out with the Ingenuity support gem anyway. Be wary of your frost wall placement as you can lock yourself into corners or get sandwiched between enemies, which could be fatal. Cast on Freeze is a very powerful tool, as you'll be able to queue up some skills you wouldn't normally want to spend time casting yourself. It does exactly as it says. Any skill gem you have slotted in the support sockets will cast upon you freezing monsters. You have to build up energy first, so it'll take a couple of freezes before it triggers, but we're stacking a lot of them, so it won't be an issue, which brings us to the first support gem linked to the Cast on Freeze. Impetus increases the energy generated to trigger Cast on Freeze, allowing the linked skills to cast more frequently. Comet is the first actual skill slotted. It calls down a large ice rock that slams into the ground, generally clearing up what Cold Snap hasn't killed already. More on Cold Snap in a moment. The next skill linked to Cast on Freeze is Frostbolt, which sends out slow-moving projectiles that deal cold damage while moving. Along the way, it'll create chilled ground, slowing monsters that are in its path. Note that any skills that are activated while using Cast on Freeze still require mana consumption. They're not free. Cast on Freeze requires that you have 60 Spirit to reserve in order to activate it. Upon reaching 100 Spirit, you want to slot in Mana Remnants to help early mana struggles. Mana Remnants will spawn a remnant from monsters that are killed while shocked, or critically hit while shocked. These remnants drop as little electric orbs and grant you mana when picked up. As you're leveling, you'll notice how hungry for mana this build becomes, so it's a great tool to have in a tight spot when your mana gets extra low. Mana Remnants is crafted using Spirit Gems and at base requires you have at least 30 Spirit to reserve and activate. Assuming you're at 100 Spirit, we're going to utilize the last 10 Spirit you have to slot the Clarity support gem. This will increase your mana regeneration rate while Mana Remnants is active. If you start feeling better about your mana regeneration, you can swap this out for Arctic Armor for more offense. Arctic Armor is going to passively gain stages. When melee attackers hit you, those stages will release a burst of cold, damaging enemies that try to hit you. Note that though it does say armor, it's actually not protecting you from anything, it's more of an offensive skill. Hypothermia curses enemies in the target area to reduce their cold resistances after standing in the affected area for a second. We can augment how this behaves by using Hexbloom support, which spreads the curse to monsters within 3 meters after the original cursed monster is killed. Alright, now let's talk about Frost Bomb. The play here is to block a monster's trajectory by throwing up a frost wall in their path. With luck, that'll draw their aggro, keep them in that place where you can drop Frost Bomb on them, and then spam more Frost Walls and Ice Novas until they're frozen, and then inevitably deleted. Frost Bomb takes 3 seconds to explode after casting it. To combat this, we'll use the Fast Forward support gem to decrease how long it takes to go off. Frost Bomb inherently inflicts cold exposures to monsters standing within the pulses, which reduces their cold resistance. We can increase this effect by slotting in Strip Away. This increases the based cold exposure effect Frost Bomb applies. Ice Nova is a powerful freeze buildup tool. Any monster caught in its area of effect will quickly get frozen, triggering cast on freeze skills. We start by supporting it with Unleash. After a short window, this will build up seals that allow Ice Nova to cast itself multiple times after you cast it just one time, further increasing the freeze buildup potential. Speaking of, slot in Glaciation to boost the freeze buildup. Finally, the support skill Astral Projection lets you cast Ice Nova anywhere you're targeting, instead of just the base of your character. So if you drop Frost Wall and Ice Bomb far enough away from you at a safe distance, you can spam Ice Nova while the other skills are on cooldown. Lightning Warp is not mandatory, however it is this current build's only form of shock infliction and would render Mana Remnants useless if you don't have it slotted. Lightning Warp will highlight monsters that are low enough on life that can be cold. Culling will instantly kill a monster when the effect of lightning is activated. When you see the blue glow shining on a monster, hit them with Lightning Warp, you'll teleport to their location, eliminate them, create a shock ground, and apply shock to any monster standing in the radius. Supports for Lightning Warp include Life Drain to regain a percentage of your life back when a monster is cold, and Soul Drain to also recover a percentage of your mana when a monster is cold. Finally, we have Cold Snap. Cold Snap shatters frozen monsters and deals massive AoE damage. On top of that, Frostbolt will be cast when Cast on Freeze activates. Frostbolt's moving orbs can be blown up with Cold Snap, dealing even more damage. To support Cold Snap, we're going to slot in Frozen Vortex. This support gem will create a vortex that deals cold damage over time after shattering a monster with Cold Snap. This will also chill them, slow them down, and reduce their recovery from shatter even if they aren't killed by it. Next support is Elemental Focus that increases a skill's elemental damage at the cost of being able to inflict ailments. Cold Snap doesn't have an increased ailment application on its own, so this isn't a major loss. The final one is Cold Penetration, decreasing the target's cold resistance. Alright, that's it for the skill gems. Let's move on to the passive tree. The tree provides a lot of support for stacking cold damage, freeze buildup, mana regeneration, critical strike chance, energy shield, and mana regeneration. We're not going to go over every single node here, but you can take a screenshot to see the path we're taking. As we make our way through the tree, we're picking up notables that increase our cast speed, our maximum mana, maximum energy shield, freeze buildup, cold damage, critical strike chances, critical strike bonuses, cooldown recovery, and damage taken recouped as life. Early on, you can take Eldritch Battery to convert all of your energy shield to mana. This can help with early mana troubles until you can scale more maximum mana, recovery, and reduced mana costs. When you're feeling more comfortable with your mana, you can spec out of Eldritch Battery to gain that energy shield back to help you with more defenses later on. For the Stormweaver Ascendancy, we're taking a couple of paths here to get the most out of this build's potential, including increased maximum mana, Arcane Surge to increase cast speed and mana regeneration, and Force of Will to increase the effect of Arcane Surge per 15 maximum mana. As you can see, we're stacking a lot of mana here, so if you do the math, you're going to have a high increased percentage of cast speed and mana regeneration. This is really going to help you want to spec out of Eldritch Battery and other mana regeneration nodes in the passive tree to spec elsewhere for more resistances or more damage. The right side of the Ascendancy tree contains the skill Elemental Storm. This will trigger a storm at the location of a critical hit, dealing damage every few seconds that monsters are standing in it. It's worth noting that this is not a damage over time effect. Anything that gives you pluses to damage over time will not affect this skill. As you path down, you can dramatically increase the cooldown recovery, allowing Elemental Storm to pop much more often as you deal critical strikes. And there you have it. Cold explosions and ice walls everywhere. This build will easily get you through the campaign and start on mapping in the endgame. What do you make of this build? What classes are you most excited for in Path of Exile 2? You need more? We've also got some excellent leveling tips to help you avoid making mistakes along your journey to the endgame, so be sure to check that out as well. For more on Path of Exile 2 and everything else, stick with IGN.